Hello and welcome to Gardener's World. In this special programme, Nick and I will be celebrating gardeners up and down the country who make the most of their gardens and make every space count. I'm lucky enough to be in this wonderful suburban garden in Dorset. It's got exotics and tropical plants combined with these lush cottage garden style borders. It's even got its very own waterfall.
And if you garden in a town or a city like me, it's important that you make use of every square centimetre of space. Now, this is my garden and I want to share design tips on how I've planted it to ensure there's colour and interest throughout the year. And we'll be meeting gardeners around the UK who are growing in front gardens, back gardens, balconies and even boats and beaches to discover how they've created gardens in these most unexpected of spaces. Coming up on today's programme, Francis heads to the beach on the Isle of Man to visit gardens that have been created in the most challenging of circumstances.
You have to, every year, be prepared to start again. These are incredibly expensive vegetables.
We meet a gardener in Sheffield who's created a haven for wildlife in a garden where space is at a premium.
I would describe it like one big wildlife hotel for all wildlife of different types, backgrounds, whatever they like, they're all welcome.
And I'll be sharing my design tips on how to make the most of your urban plot.
Well, here in Dorset, I'm in the midst of the most magnificent garden, absolutely packed full with all sorts of plants, all sorts of different areas. Talk about making every space count. And believe it or not, this garden has been created over just 6 years by Mike and Sylvia Cooper. It's a work of art. Well, thank you for welcoming me to your garden. Sure. It's marvellous. It's just beautiful.
Very kind of you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here.
So, how would you describe your garden in terms of style, Sylvia?
Cottage garden meets tropical, I think.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And lots of stages in between.
Yes.
I mean, it's very relaxed. It's very informal
Yes,
sort of
yes.
planting, isn't it?
That's what you want in a garden, don't you, to relax?
Yeah, and you want
enjoy
your
stuff.
plants to look as though they're enjoying themselves.
Yes, yes.
I think we wanted to achieve rooms without having clear division between the plants.
So, how do you make every space count?
I think we tried to pick the right plants for the right places. So plants that like nice sunny position, bed on the left side there, mostly perennials. Other plants that like it a little more shaded, we've put on the other side of the garden to try and get the best out of every individual plant.
How important is wildlife to you?
Very important. We've got snakes, frogs, toads, newts.
Yeah?
We do see the heron a lot.
Do you? You actually get a heron in there?
I love seeing them, but I absolutely hate him because he's eaten so many of our fish.
Yes, a very fat heron. I'm surprised he could take off.
We are.
I can see lots of annuals, so you must be very, very busy earlier in the year.
It is, yes.
You can't move. In the greenhouse, potting shed, everywhere, aren't they?
Yeah, once we start, usually towards the end of February, then it's full on then right through to the end of summer.
Well, it's utterly glorious. I want another look round.
Please, help yourself.
Yes.
Well, Mike and Sylvia's garden is about 25 metres long by 15 metres wide. But if, like Nick, you live in a city, then your garden space is liable to be much more challenging.
Just over a year ago, my garden was a barren plot. But in just 15 months, I'm thrilled by how well it's established. Many of the plants were grown from seed, and I've thought very carefully about every aspect of the design. One of the key components for me was this pergola. I've grown 2 different vines over it. This is an edible, which should hopefully provide me with decent grapes by the end of the season. And then I've grown an ornamental vine at the end called Vitis cogneti. Come autumn, they will take on the most fabulous colours. Oranges and yellows here, and then reds from the Vitis cogneti. Now, the vines are pretty rampant. I mean, both of these are probably put on 2 metres or more per year. So I'm tying them in to make sure they head where I want them to. Hopefully, autumn, they'll have met in the middle. Not only do these vines provide me with privacy, they also act to divide the garden. And by breaking up a small space and creating mystery and allure, you end up suggesting that your garden is bigger than it really is. I've also paid close attention to my boundaries. The garden's 10 by 11 metres with relatively high fences on the outside. I've painted this fence the deepest blue. In fact, it's virtually black. But what I love about it is that the greens look greener. They're more lush and more radiant. And then the crazy mix of flower colours I've got really pop. And beyond my boundaries, I've tried to make the most of features outside of the garden. So the sycamore back here is at least 50 years old. And so by growing the vines across the top of the pergola, I get that foliage blend into the wider landscape. My plot might be sheltered, but what if your garden is exposed to the elements? Well, before the pandemic, Francis went to the Isle of Man to meet a group of intrepid gardeners who take gardening on the edge to a whole new level.
Here on the Isle of Man, there is mile after mile of fabulous coastline. But when it comes to gardening, being beside the seaside isn't always easy. What I love about gardening is not just the thrill of seeing something growing well, but the challenge of getting it to grow at all. I'm about to meet some gardeners who face more challenges than most, and their plot, well, it's just here. This little row of terraced houses backs directly onto the beach. From the front, the houses look like fairly ordinary cottages. But from the back, they have this incredible view. And while being this close to the sea is pretty breathtaking, it also means these little gardens have to contend with everything the coast can throw at them. The gardens belong to the residents who are lucky enough to call this home. At number 11 is Helen Lee, who's lived here for more than 20 years. Her neighbours, Phil and Leslie Gurner, own a cottage 2 doors up, while Pauline Kringle and her husband have lived on the street for 40 years. First stop is Helen's garden. Oh my goodness. There's so much colour out here. It's amazing.
Well, for the summer season only.
Yeah.
But if you come on through, you'll see there's even more.
Oh, wow. And you're always taking over the beach, aren't you?
We are playing King Canute here.
Yeah. Well, what have you got?
So it's really it's in 2 halves. So there's broad beans, potatoes, cabbages and cauliflowers, chard, and then onions. So there's red onions and white onions. So that's about a year's supply.
So you're sort of self-sufficient in a lot of vegetables.
It can.
Even here. The sea must actually come right up to here sometimes.
Sometimes it comes in a storm, but you can see there's quite a steep shelf here. But basically, if it comes up, it flattens the compost. You start from nothing once the last spring tide is finished, and then I bring in compost, topsoil, manure, fork it all over, and it's just brown out here. and that's it. And then slowly start planting. So
I used to live by the sea myself, so I know that every winter everything would die, and even if something self-seeded, the seedlings would be killed off in the storm. So it really is just starting from scratch each year, isn't it?
Yeah. You have to, every year, be prepared to start again. These are incredibly expensive vegetables. Not just in terms of compost, but in love, labour, sweat, whatever. So every year you start with a new burst of optimism.
So gardening here is as much about your own internal resilience as it is about the planting.
You've got to be determined. But you get the reward. It's lovely.
Hi, Phil. Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Francis.
Phil and Leslie have lived here for 23 years and have seen their fair share of weather.
It's idyllic here today. It's hard to imagine what it must be like when there's a storm actually happening, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
completely different to in the winter when the storms hit.
In 2014, one of those winter storms battered the coastline, and Phil caught the drama and devastation on camera. But in 2002, they had their worst storm ever.
We had a huge storm, and that basically destroyed everything. Everything that's here, there was nothing left. Basically, all the grass was just covered in stones. It tore everything out.
Yeah.
That's our worst one.
Storms is actually what brought this community together and got you sort of working on this as a big cooperative, isn't it?
That's right, yes.
Yeah, the rebuilding was a communal effort to give ourselves somewhere to grow stuff and get together and get it back again.
A whole load of us coming up with wheelbarrows all up and down the path here.
Really?
Yes, for about 3 days. You've just got to get on with it. And that's what we all do. We all come together and help each other.
But you're real plants people, aren't you? It's not just the lawn. Back in there, you've got loads of beautiful flowers and on huge spikes that are still standing, even in the wind.
Yeah, even in the wind, which we've had plenty of this year. Now, I love the lupins and my delphinium, which I planted last year because my mum wanted it. And I really thought it wouldn't survive the sea salt and being on the beach. But it has, and it survived the weather and the wind.
But not just flowers as well, a whole load. You've got beautiful fuchsia hedge, a conifer, and loads of tropical plants and palms as well, so a real collection there.
Yeah, the conifer, after the storm of 2014, while we were clearing up, there was a closed cone. Don't know where it came from, but it was on the beach and I kept it. And it opened the next year, so I planted some of the seeds and got a conifer tree, which is now planted in the garden.
Yeah. And it just goes to show, actually, that if you grow something from seed in situ, it's a lot tougher, because I guarantee you, if you'd bought that conifer that size and planted it there, it would not survive.
No, that's right.
But here it is, and it's grown to be tough and able to cope.
Yeah, yeah.
What a lovely story.
These beachside gardens are a real labour of love for this neighbourly lot. And when I say labour, I'm talking about proper physical lifting and shifting.
This is not your ordinary.
No, this is not. This is true dedication.
For Pauline and Helen, though, all this is par for the course when you have a garden on the beach.
Careful, Helen.
What if it's something huge? I mean, you can't wheelbarrow anything, can you?
I have got a wheelbarrow.
Have you?
I have. But as long as there's plenty of air in the tide, you can sort of bounce it along the stones. It has been done.
Together, these neighbours are doing something rather wonderful. They haven't just created a lovely garden and grown some great produce. They've also grown their own little community here. And that's definitely something to celebrate.
These little beach gardens may not be the biggest in the world, but when it could all be washed away at the whim of the weather or of the tides, then it takes an awful lot of patience and courage and very deep preserves of positive spirit to keep on gardening. And I'm just filled with admiration for all of them.
I
think what I love more than anything about those beach gardens is this terrific sense of community that comes across. Everybody helping each other. Well, you don't need a beach garden or any sort of a garden if you're going to grow plants successfully. Pots and containers are a wonderful place to grow all sorts of plants, as beautifully illustrated here in Mike and Sylvia's garden on this patio. Well, I've got the opportunity to help Sylvia to plant yet another pot. It's so exciting. Why have you chosen these specific plants?
Because I love the colours and the various varieties of them.
And they're all sun lovers, so your pot is going to go finely where?
Round the corner in full sun, which is perfect for a terracotta pot.
What's first then? What would you like in first?
I think that the miscanthus.
So this is Cosmopolitan. It's really striking, isn't it?
It's lovely.
Here we go.
So it will make a lovely backdrop for all these beautiful plants. So the next one will be this verbena.
Such a pretty plant.
Oh, it's gorgeous, isn't it?
Here, do you think? In front of them?
In front of the grasses,
so some of these blades come through?
Come through, yes.
We're also adding an amaranth, Love Lies Bleeding, with its elegant crimson tassels.
If you wanted to put two together, one side, that's fine.
A dahlia with vibrant magenta red flowers. That's nice, that dahlia, because there's loads of buds to open. An aromatic agastache, attractive to pollinators. And an echinacea cultivar with lipstick pink flowers. Where's this going to go?
It's got to go in, because I love it.
I'm an expert at stuffing plants in small spaces. Now this is a pennisetum. It's a bit on the tender side. Probably survive here, but you can get seed from it and grow some more.
Oh, that's lovely.
Michael liked that, won't he?
Oh, he would do, yes. I'll divide it and he can use the seeds.
This is just like a mini garden, isn't it?
It is, yes. I think that looks lovely and it will grow into a beautiful picture.
Really important planting a container like this to make sure you've filled in every space.
Yes,
and you've firmed everything in.
Yes.
And this has got plenty of loam in it, lovely stuff.
Yes. All the colours go so beautifully together, don't they?
A work of art, Sylvia.
It is a work of art. It's lovely, yes, I'm delighted.
So, I think it looks pretty good, and it's going to go on getting better and better. But right now it's time for our first viewer video, and this one is from Shara Joy, who's found a very interesting way of indulging her passion for gardening, though she's not even on terra firma.
Welcome to my pontoon garden. My name's Shara. We live on this boat and pontoon just outside of York on the River Ouse, and I just wanted to give you a little look at what we've been doing with our containers on our floating garden. We love to use baskets and things that we have lying around to plant up. So these beautiful forget-me-nots are coming out of this old basket. We've used these chairs just to bring a bit of height to the garden. We just bought this clematis earlier this year and it's doing quite well, a nice early flower, but it seems to be climbing again. So our hope is that that's going to go all along the trellising. When we first bought the boat, it came with this pontoon, and although the structure was very sound, it was in a really dilapidated state. So we've added to the structure, redone the walkway, put on these posts and lovely rope details, and then just added willow backing. And then, of course, we've had so much fun bringing all our containers on and building our garden up around that. So welcome aboard our home, the Arctic Skewer. This is my conservatory, my greenhouse, it's my everything. This is where it all starts. And my sunflowers have really taken over. We absolutely love living out here on our floating home. But for us, the most magical time of day is first thing in the morning, waking up, making that first cup of coffee and just coming out to sit down, taking in the view and the tranquillity. Nothing beats that.
I'm really envious of that view. Living in the city, tranquillity can be hard to come by, but it just goes to show how much you can grow, even if you've only got space for pots. When it comes to small spaces, plant selection is absolutely vital. It's really key that you go for species that are going to keep delivering blooms for many, many months. And this geranium Roseanne is a prime example. It will give about 6 or 8 months of flower in a garden. But my real secret weapon is this. It's called Anastodontia elreo. It comes from South Africa and it's better known as the Cape Mallow. The thing that makes it really special is that it flowers for 12 months of the year. So you just get this running succession of these fabulous pink blooms. And it's hardy enough to cope well here in my city garden. To keep on top of a small space, it's really important that you replace plants through the season as they start to go over. So underneath me here is this digitalis foxglove, which was looking gorgeous earlier in the season, but it's now finished and it's dropped some seeds, so hopefully it'll carry on next year. And also I've got this linaria, which again looked great. You can see it's starting to look pretty sad now. So I want to pull both of these out and replace them. What I want to do is to put in a grass which is going to create great show all the way through summer, autumn and into winter. I have this particular favourite plant called Miscanthus nepalensis. Here it is. What's so special about it for me is that it has these gorgeous seed heads now, and this lovely burnished gold tone gets even better. And extraordinarily, it will hold on all the way through until spring. So all I need to do is fill the soil back in around the edges. And don't be afraid to get your boot in if you're planting larger specimens like this. Give this a bit of an open up. Make sure all the blades are nicely natural. And there we go. Beautiful Miscanthus, bringing extra colour and texture to the garden. Now, I've absolutely filled these borders with a range of plants which provide great support to wildlife, so bees and butterflies, hoverflies and the like. But that's nothing in comparison to a gardener in Sheffield who's gone above and beyond to create a wildlife haven.
I decided to build a garden like this because I wanted to make a place where wildlife can live in the city. I would describe it like one big wildlife hotel for all wildlife of different types, backgrounds, whatever they're like, they're all welcome. I'm George. I live in Sheffield with my wife, Sophie Stenton. It's an end terrace house. It's not got a big garden, it's got a small courtyard at the back, and then we're lucky to have a side part of the garden, but it's still only about 2.5 metres across. I've made every bit of use of it as I can. Well, gardens have always been a good strong point for wildlife, but more and more people are using plastic grass, concrete in it, but it's like that last little bit of refuge that there is, it's getting less and less, but it's not difficult to do both. You can have it low maintenance and a bit for wildlife. It's not hard to do. Profession is a firefighter. I work for South Yorkshire Fire and Rescue. Been doing that for 12 years plus 4 years in the RAF as a firefighter, because it's shift work, so obviously you do unsocial hours, but then I also get time where I can create and make things. garden's too small to waste any space, so we've gone upwards by making a pergola. We've got plants growing up it, even a step, there's storage in the step. I've got a seating area which you can store things under. I've got the shed, which is for storage. All of it I've made in the garden. My theory is to bring wildlife into the garden, you need to give them a home, and that's surface area of things. So you need more surface area for them to live. I did a feature on the front. It would look like a tree, just with lots of screws, but then you get all the spiders nesting on it. So even that does something. Anything is better than nothing. So this is a bug house fence. I had a fence already, which did the job, and it was fine, but I try and give nature a home wherever we can in the garden. It's basically a hollow construction, it's got mesh either side, and then you just fill it. So you've got cardboard here just rolled up. This is an old Christmas tree. And the idea is that all this ivy is going to grow through eventually, and eventually you won't even see it, but whatever wants to live in it can live in it. Here you've got different logs, all different holes in. Regards depth of the holes, I read somewhere 12 centimetres was good. However, my drill bit isn't that long, but I figure wildlife isn't set in stone. Whatever wants to live in them can. It might not be appropriate for some things, it might be appropriate for other. So on the wall, these are like mini bug houses. Obviously, we haven't got enough with a fence. We're going to get even more. But again, it's kind of like surface area. So a wall is going to be no good. So it's kind of like, how can we make it that things can live in it? Ideally, I'd go right up to the apex of the roof. However, my ladder doesn't go that big, so that is the extent of my reach. So we're currently sat, I call it the green garage. It's a pergola, particularly for the bees. You've got loads of flowers, potato vines flowering just now. I've shoved things like a teapots into it as well, because apparently robins like teapots to nest in. I like being inventive. Water's always something we want to make the absolute maximum use of. So we've got the shed roof where it rains on. The water then pours off, and I noticed the gutters, well, obviously they were wasting, the water was going. So what I've done, if this is a down pipe, intermittently I'd cut halfway through, and then all you do, put a bit of gravel in, soil, plant it, and what happens is the rain slowly trickles down there, and then eventually it goes into the bottom, so it's making every last chance to use the rain before it disappears. I like the idea of growing vegetables and things like that, so I created the hydroponic. So all it is, it's just PVC pipe, and what I've done, I've drilled holes, and there's like a washer here, and you can adjust the depth in each pipe by pushing the pipe further in or pulling it out. So when you first start growing stuff, you have it quite deep in there, and then the more full with roots it gets, you can bring it down so there's less water in it, so you can adjust it accordingly depending what you need. So here's an example of the roots. They're not particularly long at the moment, but if they get longer, they're more likely to block the pipe, so you just reduce the amount of water flow by making the pipe go lower. So we've got lots of creatures which live in here. Usually there's some frogs just under here. Oh yeah, we've got a big one. Hello. Water's essential for a wildlife garden. It can just be a bowl for birds to drink out of, but ideally you want a pond. And it doesn't need to be big, it's easy. Building material, if I can find it, I will. We had a big fire ages ago and loads of hose was damaged, so I got it and I made a hammock. I think some of the zoos for like the orangutans and monkeys, they use it, and I was like, I could do that. So I made a hedgehog feeding station, that is, so it's not actually a hedgehog house, it's a feeding station. It's got like a corridor that goes in and then bends round. Only a hedgehog can get in. The hedgehogs will come in, eat, turn around and go. And I've had to make it longer because the local cats, smaller cats, could manage to get in. We have fixed it with the cats now. They do try, but they can't get all the way in now, and that's successful. Built the shed. I have a beehive on the roof. I've used decking boards to make it extra strong, and it's got the reinforced wood underneath. The space up there was perfect for bees. It's nicely in the sun. I'm smoking it just to keep them calm. check them once a week to make sure they're all happy and healthy. So we're looking for eggs, food, larvae. We're trying to see if there's any disease or anything like that. Everything looks fine, which is good. Best thing about it is, because it's raised, it doesn't affect anywhere except up there. People walk back and forth. Some people won't even know there's a beehive up there. Having a small space, it's both a curse and a blessing in that it creates challenges, which is good because you can show people you can do it. It doesn't matter on the size of the space. The biggest sense of achievement is actually the hardest one to come by, and that is making it and having something come. You know, you can make a hedgehog house, you can make a pond, but there's no guarantee it will come. So when it does, it's worked. It's like you've been accepted. We are happy with your creation.
Well, what a brilliant and creative use of space that is. Do you know, when you're talking about gardening for wildlife, you very often think of the countryside. But of course, our gardens are really crucial spaces as far as wildlife are concerned. And one of the most vital elements in any garden is water. Now, Mike and Sylvia have already got a brilliant pond, but one of the things it's short of is a couple of marginals. So I brought a couple with me. You're busy as usual.
Oh, try to be, Carol. Yeah, try to be. Just keep things nice and tidy.
This pond is just oozing life, isn't it?
It is indeed.
I think what's so lovely about your pond is that you've got all these sort of classic elements. So you've got oxygenators here that keep your fish happy, I'm sure.
I do.
And then the water lilies that give them some shade. I brought you this
wonderful.
splendid Boutomus. It's the flowering rush, but the great thing about it is all those dragonfly larvae will have somewhere to climb up and just expand their wings, dry off.
And fly off, and we'll enjoy them flying around.
Marginals, they like paddling, but they don't like swimming. So hopefully it'll really enjoy life there. And I've got another one too.
Oh, have you indeed? Oh,
I'll go and fetch
while
it.
you're getting that, I'll pop this one in the water.
Yeah, go on. Even if you haven't got room for a pond the size of Mike and Sylvia's, you can still introduce water into your garden. Just a washing up bowl sunk into the ground is adequate. Now, still to come. We'll be meeting a gardener who's created an incredible garden with a very restrained colour palette.
I love white flowers. The flowers really do shine, which is really lovely.
And Joe visits a unique front garden where water is central to its design.
You know, I love the way you sort of flooded the site with water, and it means that you can get these wonderful flag irises in all the way around it, which add this beautiful vertical accent.
But now for another one of your viewer videos, and this one is from a young man who's turned the tightest of spaces into his very own edible Eden.
Hi, I'm Vincent and I'm 11 years old and I'm from Millbank in West Yorkshire. My garden is about 6 square metres behind our garage. But when we moved in it was very overgrown and it was full of bracken and brambles and nettles and things like that. So now we've turned it into this wonderful space which I like to garden in. So here I have my celery. And I love celery because it's a very versatile plant and it's very easy to grow. Also, it's very delicious. Here I have my courgettes. I've had them since they were little seedlings. And I have green and yellow ones, which instead of just growing one variety, I thought I'd grow 2. Now here I have my 2 tomatoes. They're very nice and I personally love tomatoes, but they're very easy to grow. Also, they give you a lovely smell. As you can see, my garden is very narrow, so we had to have a think. And then I had an idea. Why don't we use trugs? They're small and narrow and very efficient. And also, they keep all those cheeky slugs away from my veggies. Now, here's my rhubarb. I personally love rhubarb because it is a very nice addition to your apple and rhubarb tart. Now, here are my potatoes. I love potatoes. They're just a generally good plant to grow because all you have to do is put them in some soil once they're sprouting, and then you need to water them. And then you've pretty much got potatoes. I'm really looking forward to harvesting all my plants. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have enjoyed seeing my garden.
It's great to see Vincent making the most of his space to grow fruit and veg. 2 years ago, when I was planning this garden, I was determined to be self-sustaining and absolutely fill it with fruit and veg. And then I introduced a few ornamentals, and then a few more. And then my inner plantsman took over and the whole garden became ornamental. But I've still got a few spaces left that I can grow edibles in, so I want to make the most of them. So I planted up this window box with chilies. They're all green at the moment, but they'll ripen up going into late summer and autumn and can be harvested. But I also want to go for a crop that's going to give me something very quickly. So I'm going to sow some cut and come again lettuce into this window box. So I'm just going to sow evenly across the surface. With that done, sprinkle some compost over the surface. And finally, I just want to ensure that there's good contact between the seeds and the compost. That's now ready to be watered, and it can sit on my sunny windowsill, and in about a month or so's time, be ready to harvest the first crop. I'll just crop those down with scissors, leave the other half. Then in another week or two from that, I can crop these. Another 2 weeks has passed, these will have come up again, and it goes back and forth, and you should get sort of 6 to 8 weeks of harvest from a really simple little window box like this. Now, I don't have a front garden here, but across the UK, millions of gardeners do. Now, unfortunately, they often take a back seat to the bigger garden at the rear. However, Joe has visited a gardener in Glamorgan who's turned his front garden into the star of the show.
I've often wondered why front gardens don't get the same attention that back gardens do. Now, perhaps it's because they're functional spaces that you nip through to get to the front door, or they're somewhere to park the car or store the recycling bins. Well, today I've come to meet an extraordinary gardener who's done something really special to his front garden, and he's used every inch of the space. Richard, feeding the fish. Professor Richard Weston is a retired architect and lectures at Cardiff University. Richard, this is absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, I mean, I love the way the light's working on the wall, and you sort of flooded the site with water, but you got so much planting in. But my first question is, you've got a back garden, so I've got to ask, why the front garden?
A good question, but there's a very logical answer, which is it gets much more sun. And given that it's a close, there's very little traffic. Yeah. So it's very private and quiet.
So what's the inspiration behind this garden?
Well, it was partly practical. The ground falls 3 feet from the pavement, so that's quite a change of level.
Yeah, because this is really quite a tricky spot, isn't it? You know, it's a sloping site, so you've had to dig it out and level it.
So the first issue was to retain earth in an interesting and elegant way. And I've long had an idea about something architectural that could be like a cliff, where it created pockets for plants to grow in the same way you get little ledges that accumulate soil and you get that lovely quality of a natural cliff. That the whole thing goes right back in a way to my childhood and my student days. I'd always wanted a pond. And then, as a student, one of the first projects I did was about making structure out of paper. And a way to give paper strength is to fold it and interlock it.
I really like this wall, but I also love the way you've left these little areas of planting. You've dotted the odd succulent in, and I love that little sempervivum, the one that's got the rusty tones that match in with the wall.
And they're so easy to water because you just spray the steel above and it just slides in, you know, and drips out the bottom.
Was there a theme behind the planting here?
Silver birch is probably my favourite tree from forever, but then it had to have lots of ferns because I just love ferns. They're so beautiful to me. And something I was taught was the virtue of greens in planting.
But one key element is this marginal shelf set in the pond. You know, it's nice and generous, and it means that you can get these wonderful flag irises in all the way around, which add this beautiful vertical accent. A restricted palette, but it just feels that every plant is beautifully placed within this strong architectural framework. These tiles are really interesting. I love the way the colour works with the garden, but I've never seen anything quite like them. What are they?
They're porcelain with digital images fired into them, and the images come from details of minerals, which is one of my particular passions. This is what I think of as a kind of coastline here, is from this agate. And I bought a microscope, and I can capture tiny areas and magnify them massively.
So you've blown up an image and printed it onto a tile.
Exactly, printed it on.
And that will last for
80 years, should do.
Wow.
More maybe.
What I love is the personality of you know, is coming out through this garden, and it's so unique.
I was always fascinated by the way gardens express this kind of comprehensive relationship to nature. And in this, what interests me is that the systems of order that operate at the minutest scale in natural materials also are found in the larger scale of plants and the rest of it. And it feels, to me, it feels like a garden in which all these disparate things just belong completely together.
There's the science behind it, there's all the different elements that you've brought together, and it's been a real insight because it's not just a front garden solution, it's a very beautiful garden too. And it's got, you know, your interests and personalities layered through it. It's been great, thank you.
We can't all think of digging great big holes in our front gardens and filling them with water and introducing all that steel. But that garden is so packed with original creative ideas. It just makes you want to think of your own, you know, how can I change my garden? How can I make it something really, really special and individual? While talking about originality and creativity, this garden is absolutely packed with it, everywhere you look. Well, this is one of my favourite bits. I think it's majestic, look at that. It's full of beautiful, beautiful vibrant coloured plants. And when you look at it, you realise that absolutely everything in here can be grown just in one single season. So the dahlias you could get as tubers in the spring, start them off, get them into growth. The amaranths, the French marigolds, this wonderful tithonia in the background, all those can be grown from seed. Start them in February, prick them out, pop them on, put them in, and look at this magnificent display. Now the other thing that this really teaches you is aim big. You know, this is something that could be emulated in almost any garden at all. You could scale it down crossways, but you could still keep that height, maintain that sort of volume too, so that you really create drama. And then, if you possibly can, do what they've done here. Make the bed so that you can walk around the back of it, so that you can get a completely new view. Not only has that bed created secrecy in the first place, but then when you go around the corner, look, there's a whole new vista, and it's something that absolutely all of us could do. Well, this garden is packed to the gunnels with vibrant colour, but we visited one gardener who uses a much more restrained palette.
My love of gardening, I suppose, started when I was a child, and I had a pet bunny. When he died, I wanted to remember him, and I chose a white rose. And the white rose meant peace and tranquillity for me. My name's Louise Reed. I've lived here for 34 years. When I first arrived, the garden was actually just a piece of lawn. It's kind of evolved from having my children here. It was like a playground for the children, and my dog and my rabbits. Slowly, slowly, as the children grew up, the garden became more of a flower garden. I love white flowers. I wanted a fragrant garden. I wanted a private garden. I needed somewhere where I could feel calm and relaxed. Nearly every plant has a white form, and so there's an enormous choice. And in a small garden, with the backdrop of fences and hedging and the foliage, the white really pops, it really stands out. It extends the garden into the evening, where the flowers really do shine, and they kind of like dance above the foliage like stars, which is really lovely. I love trees, and I wanted to plant something to represent the birth of my children. And the tree in the front garden is an ornamental cherry tree, and it has beautiful pink blossom. I call it my candy floss tree. And I actually bought it from Woolworths. It was 99p, and it was really basically a twig. And my dream was that as my children grew up, that I would be able to lay in my bed and actually see the blossom through the window. And I've achieved that. I've got a full variety of plants in my garden. I love tall flowers like delphiniums and foxgloves, but my favourite flowers of all are roses, particularly full-petalled, fragrance, old-fashioned varieties. I have probably 100 roses in this garden. I've lost count now. This is Wollerton Old Hall. It's a peachy apricot colour that fades to a creamy white, and it's highly fragranced with a myrrh perfume. Not all of my roses are white. I love the Pilgrim. This is a lovely creamy lemon colour, and it has a rosette form. It's not as highly fragranced as Wollerton Old Hall, but if you put it near where you're walking, where you can bend down and smell it, or as I've done by my swing bench, you get the full fragrance. I don't think after all these years I could live without my roses. I have suffered with my mental health. I suffer with anxiety, and unfortunately I've had quite a few traumas in my life. And at the moment I'm suffering with a very rare form of cancer. So the garden has actually been my sanctuary, and I love the full cycle of life, and it gives me meaning. And in the winter time, when it's difficult times, sometimes I look forward to planning the garden. It gives me real positivity for the future. Anyone who has a small space and would like a garden, I would say think carefully about what your needs are, how much time you've got, what your budget is. Don't try and copy somebody else. Make it your garden. I think in a small garden, you should be brave enough to go big. I've created this large pergola with this beautiful rambling rose, Rosa seagull. It creates height, impact, and it's a haven for the wildlife. I have a beautiful Philadelphia, and I've pruned it, so it's like a small tree. By adding bigger structures, you've got more choices for planting. I like to be quite extravagant, and I really like the ebbs and flow and different varying heights. I think this adds more interest, it adds more depth, even in a small garden. Opening my garden to the public has been a real experience, and I was really anxious at first, but I had a visitor's book and people wrote the most wonderful comments. And in the winter, when I'm a bit down sometimes, I read the comments and it boosts me again and inspires me to do more gardening and share it. My current rabbit, his name is Mr. Fleur. I let him hop around the garden under strict supervision. He likes sniffing and hopping around and having a bit of freedom, and he likes trying to eat my precious flowers. I love having my own space that I've designed, that I've created. I've chosen very carefully the plants that are in it. I've nurtured them. They are my babies. It's only small, but it's mine, and it's my peaceful place on earth. And the garden has given me more than words can ever say, and it's really helped me.
I know what Louise means about her plants. Now, one of the real advantages to growing in a small space is that you can pour all of your TLC into far fewer plants, give them more attention. And that's certainly the case with this Helianthus salicifolius, willow-leafed sunflower. Now, in truth, it really wants to be growing in blazing sun, but I wanted its height and its texture at the back of the border here, which is relatively shady. So I've gone through the slightly laborious process of staking each individual stem. And of course, I can get away with that because it's at the back of the border, so the staking can't be seen. Now, they're at about 6 foot now, and they'll go up to about 8 foot at the end of the season. And I think they're the perfect addition to add that soft, willowy texture to the back of my border. But what if you haven't got any garden space at all? Well, we received a video from Robin Anchorage in the US, who's shown that with a bit of love, a balcony can be more than enough space to create something really special.
My name is Robin Anchorage, and welcome to my small space garden in Orlando, Florida. It's only about 4.5 by 9 feet, but I do get south and west sunlight. It is covered and does get wind, but I've figured out how to make the space usable. This is my first tip. Make furniture multi-purpose. This is my recycled pine wood worm vermiculture bin. It doubles as a table and as a way for us to recycle our food scraps in only a matter of months into valuable compost. In an urban space, drainage can be hard, so I use paving bricks to keep everything elevated to prevent dirt clogging. Pairing plants together in boxes or planters can be helpful in a small space. Less pots equals more room for things to grow. This mint in the front likes to spread and sends out runners. So I've paired all 3 mint plants in one planter to spread all they desire. After running out of floor space, I've used hardware store wire, 18 or 20 gauge, to anchor in terracotta pots to the slick metal railing. They can be anchored short or long to create a cool visual effect, as well as giving plants optimal room to grow and to achieve sunlight. Not to mention, it's aesthetically pleasing. Hopefully I gave you some tips and tricks that will help make your small space more usable.
Well, thank you so much, Robin, for showing us just how productive even a small balcony can be. I'm here in the jungle at the back of Sylvia and Mike's garden, and it is just astounding. Packed into this small area, you've got huge tetrapanax, tree ferns, enormous miscanthus, and a waterfall to boot. The whole thing just feels lovely and jungly and intense. You're aware you're going to have all sorts of adventures in here. But I'll tell you what, if you haven't got time to create your own exotic corner this weekend, here are some jobs that you probably can do.
Ivy can be a great plant for covering a fence, and here I'm effectively growing like a hedge on my timber fence. Now, after a summer season of growth, the ivy is starting to take over a bit. So now's the time to cut it back as hard as you like to keep it looking neat and tidy through to the end of the season and into winter.
It's an excellent time for taking cuttings of salvias. Choose unflowered shoots a few inches long. Cut just below a leaf node. Remove the lower leaves, nip out the growing tip. Place your cuttings around the edge of a clay pot up to the first remaining pair of leaves. Water well and put in a warm place out of direct sunlight. Spray them with water occasionally. Roots should be pushing through in a few weeks' time.
During the summer months, it's important to keep any glasshouse space cool and maintain high humidity. Water any stone, brick or concrete floors, prevent plants getting overheated, and to keep pests like red spider mite, which thrive in dry conditions, at bay.
Don't you love this garden? I do. And the garden itself is full of love. Mike and Sylvia love their plants, they love putting them together, they love sharing their garden with other people too. And above all, they've taught us that every space counts. And I just want to say an enormous thank you from you and from me to Mike and Sylvia for letting us share their wonderful garden.
And thank you for visiting me in my garden. Now, I might not have Patty or Nellie to help me out, but I do have my very own canine garden assistant. This is Orla. Well, that's it for this week. Monty will be back at Longmeadow next week at 8 o'clock. So until then, goodbye.